Are we
3,
live yet?
2,
Jesus.
1. Whoosh! Guys. All right. I came from a different universe. All right. I'm here to warn you that if you don't do this podcast down to the letter, the Twitter community is going to get us, and all of the other film communities as well. All you have to do is just watch free movies, Mr. Nobody, Cloud Atlas, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. Nobody really cares about what you have to say except for Everything Everywhere All at Once, because it's an A24 movie and it stars Michelle Yeoh, so people get very upset about that sort of thing. All right, just pay attention. Pretend I'm not even here. Wow, that was a really quick episode introduction. Hi guys. I don't really remember what
Well,
happened, but
I'm actually a little confused. You see, I just got back from the universe where they only have something sometimes in a short amount of time.
yeah, I
And
came
I
from the
don't
universe that had something somewhere at some places.
Yeah, right. Howdy everyone for those listening at home.
For somebody who?
Yeah. Wait, movies exist in this universe? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean,
What is
that
cinema?
does raise an interesting question about how in the world you could type out a movie title in a universe with hot dog fingers. I mean,
You use your
anyway,
feet, obviously.
yeah, right.
This is First Dates with Moire. In case you haven't guessed, it's the Multiverse of Chadness. I'm your host, Ian Taylor. Joining me tonight is my co-host, Devon King, and special
Hey,
guest and American filmmaker with a new project coming up, Stephen
Hey,
Beason.
yes, thank you so much for having me.
Oh.
You may know me from such short films as Hopeless Romantic,
Woo!
which did pretty well on the festival circuit. I've been on the show countless times before, and I'm about to start on my next project, Medium Rare. So if you follow me on Facebook, Stephen Beason, or on Instagram is at MeMovieMagic. I'll be posting some more updates about that production. I actually have a meeting about it tonight, so we'll
Yeah.
see what happens. But
What if I want to
yeah,
see the
lots of
sequel? Well
exciting.
done.
Yeah, thank
well,
you, thank you.
I hope you end up in a universe where you get to that meeting on time.
Yes. Well, I may have to bid a Wiedersehen early in the universe that says a Wiedersehen unironically. And
So yeah,
yes.
so the theme for tonight is a little all over the place, I'll admit, which is very fitting because that's how I am. Um, I originally had some pretentious title in mind, like Lives Unled, because all these movies are about like the burden of choice and what that can mean in our day-to-day lives, um, in different ways. Also, the concept of the multiverse, ever since this has come up in scientific study, has been a hot topic of debate and intrigue, and also a great way for Hollywood to retcon franchises that aren't going well. I'd say arguably starting with X-Men: Days of Future Past, they're like, hey, we can use this multiverse theory to undo bad writing or movies that didn't go well, and rewrite a timeline for these characters that people like, and more importantly, make money. Um, and So I think this whole concept is right in the zeitgeist. Everything from shows like Rick and Morty, um, and you could say this even went further back with like The Matrix. Like one of these films claims they wouldn't have existed without The Matrix. Actually, I'd argue two of them. Um, anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this intro, but just the
That was
concept of the
clever.
multiverse,
I mean,
the
I
concept of the
understood that
multiverse
reference.
in yeah, there you go. But the concept of the multiverse is right in the zeitgeist these days, and I'm wondering, is this good for Hollywood? Is this bad for Hollywood? Is this good for us? Is this bad for us? I'm undecided on this. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I think it depends. I think, I was kind of listening to the Red Letter Media review about everything, everywhere, all at once, which we'll be discussing later in the show. But one thing they brought up was, this, and I mean, not to spoil my thoughts, but they were talking about how well done that movie was. And specifically, that I mean, that movie has come out now. It's been out for a couple of months. It was in theaters. It was basically one of those that, was basically word of mouth. I mean, theaters only. Now it's been on video on demand. And yeah, I mean, it's been around for at least a few months, but it's interesting because, like, even within the last week, it was just randomly trending on Twitter because people are talking about it, because people are invested in it. So I don't know if the multiverse is going to be like a massive thing moving forward, but I think what people are resonating with is original art. I think they're resonating with something that is fresh and something that is new and something that's well made. And I feel like Everything Everywhere had that, again, without spoiling too much of my thoughts. Whereas, like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, I mean, that was like people stopped talking about that a couple of days after the memes hit Facebook. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So I think that's more what people are resonating with. This is an original story. People are really hungry for that. This is well made, well executed. It accomplishes what it sets out to do. And I think any film that comes out and successfully does that, especially nowadays, is going to win people over.
Yeah, it really
Certainly, I
depends
think
on what you do with the concept. I think the key to the concept is that you need an emotional connection with the characters involved in the universe. But just like everything else, studios don't want that. Studios want to use multiverse as an excuse to throw in other franchises and other references and basically just drown it down in a sea of fan service. But the multiverse can be so much more than that. A multiverse can be the perfect way of exploring a single character or a single struggle. But just like anything else, if you just bog it down with a bunch of nonsense, you lose the emotional connection and you stop caring. I think that's why Multiverse of Madness kind of lost, touch with people because that's exactly what it was. It used the multiverse to, spoiler alert, bring back Patrick Stewart and John Krasinski because everybody likes John Krasinski and we need to see him as Mr. Fantastic. But it does absolutely nothing else with the concept. But if you do something, with the concept that's given to you, there's so much potential this genre can have.
Mhm.
So all you
Well,
gotta
and
do
I
is
think
not squander it.
well, and I think that ties into kind of a problem with franchise manufactured content
Hmm.
that we see a lot, where it's like, remember this movie that you like?
Yeah, it's the equivalent of like Twitter determining how a movie turns out. Like that's not how a movie should be. A movie should be a creator's vision. It shouldn't feel like it was molded by the internet to this bland pile piece of clay, like bland piece
Well,
of
and I mean,
clay.
I think that also kind of speaks to everything everywhere too. Is like even the people that maybe it didn't resonate with, and we'll get into that, but it's like I think even they would be like, like it's hard to it's hard to stay mad at it because it's like I never once while watching it thought this is made by somebody who didn't know what kind of movie they wanted to make.
Yeah, it has a
You know what
voice.
I mean?
It's not a voice
Yeah.
shouting nonsense.
No, it has a clear vision and it wants to accomplish something. And I mean, again, spoilery, but I think it does accomplish that.
Absolutely. Would you say Morbius 2 accomplishes that? Oh, I'm sorry, I mean Mr. Nobody. It's Morbius 2 in the other universe. I got that
Yes.
mixed up.
He's
Morbin
a,
time,
a
It's
morbid
multiverse
male.
in time.
Morbin. But no, it's weird. Like I look at this podcast as our way of kind of looking into the world through the lens of movies, which is an inherently flawed optic, I'll admit. And I like to sort of explore different kinds of films that look at the world in different ways, and we can contrast and compare how do we see, reality and compare it to how this movie presents it. Not to sound too heady, but I kind of use this podcast as sort of a microcosm for us exploring the universe that's out there through our own lens of the films we've made, and considering the James Webb Telescope is sending back its first images, and we're really seeing far into the depths of the universe out there. Who knows what discoveries will make that make us feel like even smaller pieces of shit. Uh,
Yeah, right.
Subtle. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, was that your introduction, Devon?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Well done.
Well,
Yeah.
Very nice.
all right. Well, let's see. I think we'll go ahead and get the episode started. Um, Devon, that was impressive. Very nice. Now, let's see Paul Allen's multiverse film. We're talking. We're talking about.
Hey, that fits.
We're
Love
talking
the
about
one-upsmanship. Let's do it.
Yeah, Mr. Nobody, 2009. It's a science fiction drama written and directed by Jacques Van der Mel. I'm probably butchering that, but he is a Belgian filmmaker. He is, from what I can tell, this was probably one of his more mainstream films. I think this may have been even his only English language film. But it stars Mr. Paul Allen slash Morbius himself, Jared Leto, Sarah Polly, Diane Kruger, Juno Temple. I mean, lots of stars in this. And it tells the life story of a Mr. Nemo Nobody who is 118 years old. He is the oldest living man on Earth after the future has basically achieved a quasi form of immortality. And yes, Jared Leto is the one hope remaining for humanity. So take that as you will. So yeah, this is kind of told in a unreliable narrator fashion. There's this idea that Nemo is on his deathbed and is recounting his past lives or possible futures. And yeah, I actually kind of loved this film. I thought it was really well done. I was surprised. I remember watching it, and this is a runtime of like 2 hours, I think 35 minutes or so, somewhere right in there.
2 hours 18.
And yeah, right. And I was kind of thinking to myself, like, it kind of drags a little bit. Not as bad as another film we'll be talking about tonight. But I remember thinking while I was watching it, like, yeah, I'm interested, I'm invested, I'm kind of into this, but like, it has to stick the landing. That's kind of the thing that I kept coming back to, is like, if this can convincingly pull off what I consider to be a satisfying conclusion, because in a way it almost is a mystery. It almost is this kind of like, we're dealing with this unreliable narrator, and he's recounting maybe what happened, maybe what didn't happen, maybe what could happen. And I remember thinking, if this can just come together in a way that kind of ties things up, I think I can forgive some of its faults. And it's not a perfect film, but as the film progressed and we got to the end credits, I loved this. I thought it was really well done. I thought it has a nice message attached to it that was not overbearing, or I mean, yeah, I thought the technical elements were great. There's some interesting cinematography, lots of really interesting color choices that we'll kind of get into. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about it.
Man, I remember watching this when I was younger, and I also had the same kind of thing. Like, I was hoping for like a satisfying conclusion by the end of it, and I just remember finding it very frustrating, because of how
Sure.
indecisive the main character is. And revisiting this years later and watching it again, I'm like, well, shit, that's literally me now.
Right. Literally me.
I can relate. Yeah.
God damn it. And I thought you were gonna hate this. I was so sure that you were gonna hate this movie. So now
Yeah, me
No, I
too.
actually loved it.
I'm totally thrown by that now because I was gonna hop on the defense of this one.
No, no.
I'm sure Ian has his qualms, but
Uh-oh.
Well, here's the thing.
there's definitely several things to nitpick
Oh,
about this film
it's
before we
by
get
no
to it. But
means.
I
Yeah,
do
it's by
think
no means perfect.
I do think it absolutely hits its message home. Basically,
Yeah,
people who are overwhelmed with the burden of choice, who are in like an instant kind of considering every possibility that could happen. This film is trying to say, well, no matter which way you go, things kind of balance out. You'll have just as many positives and negatives no matter which way you go.
well,
So
see,
just
to me, that wasn't
make a choice
exactly
and
what
anyway. Well,
that wasn't exactly what I took out of it. I think,
fair enough.
and this is just my interpretation, and it is a very, surrealist sort of narrative. It's very open to interpretation. It's not just an unreliable narrator. I mean, there's tons of like sci-fi. There's all this like big crunch, string theory. Like, there's a lot to unpack here. But to me, one of the things that I kind of got out of it by the end is, the decisions that you make, they can bring you the ultimate success. They can bring you happiness beyond your wildest dreams. Or, you could just be driving down the road and be in a car accident and be in a vegetative state for the rest of your life. I mean, and that's horrific. And, kind of spoilers, but, not exactly, because there's a whole multitude of choices that the Jared Leto character makes, and we see how they play out in almost every situation. But by the end of the day, I think what the film is trying to say is that even if the worst possible thing imaginable happened, you still took the chance. And it's better to try and fail than it is to do nothing. And I think that's an incredible, thought. I think that's really poignant and deep in a way that I was not expecting from a film like this.
Yeah, and that also ties into what I was taking from the message is that it's almost no matter what choice you make, as long as you make the choice and you're active in choosing things, um, most of the time things will work out. Like there will be just as many positives and negatives no matter which direction you go, and you just have to own up to that choice and make it your own. Um, and it'll be just as meaningful either way.
Well, you guys are right. I don't get me wrong. I love. This is one of the most hit and miss movies I've ever seen. Like it's so. I love half of this movie, and I could have done without the other half. TV shows that are done by different directors, and some directors like clearly know what they're doing, and they deliver like an interesting style and really like drive home the characters and the story of that episode. And other episodes feel like they were just kind of written by some studio schmuck that, you know, just kind of shat all over the screen and didn't really know what to do with the characters, and everything just kind of feels like filler. That feels like the equivalent of this movie to me. There's parts of it. Sometimes the writing is profound and interesting. Other times it feels like a grade schooler like looked up a bunch of words in a dictionary and just bombed it all over the screen. Sometimes the acting's great. Other times Jared Leto. I really wasn't a fan of his performance, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And also like yeah, parts of it are gorgeous. There's some great color grading and everything, but other scenes, the directing felt kind of flat. Like it reminded me of the prequels a little bit. Nowhere near as bad, but kind of a similar issue where it's like, oh, we're just gonna shoot this in a room with the most boring like shot versus shot possible and just like vomit exposition.
I mean,
but other parts don't feel
that
way.
There's nothing boring about the way this film is shot. I'm gonna say that.
I don't know.
Would
some
agree with that.
Some of it kind of felt flat to me, but other stuff felt like fantastic and beautifully composed and really interesting and unique. Like I swear this movie was directed by two different people. And it isn't, but it doesn't feel that way to me.
It was written and directed by one guy.
I know, but it felt like it was to me.
Here's where I will agree
Facts
with
don't
you.
care about your feelings. That's the only time I'm ever gonna unironically quote Ben Shapiro and
Oh God, yeah. Well,
All
here's
right.
one thing that I will agree with you on, Ian, and then I will immediately disagree with you.
I'm looking forward to
There
it.
are some moments that I think are not as great as others, but I'd almost argue, now, not on a technical level, but I'd almost argue on like a narrative level. There's a couple of things where it gets a little, over the top in some ways, and it's
Yeah.
like, but here's the thing, it's like, and this is what I came back to again and again. It's like, can this stick the landing? And I was like, by the end of it, I was willing to overlook the flaws in the story where it was maybe not as cohesive as the rest of the film because it all tied together
Yeah,
for me.
I'd agree with
And the
that.
message was so clear, and it was subtle enough without beating you over the head with it, but it was a really poignant and deep message. And the acting, I disagree with you. I thought Jared Leto did pretty good here. I mean, he's not
Yeah.
he's not great as the old
Oh no,
Nemo
which
Nobody,
is a
but
shame
again,
because the
that's kind.
makeup for him is fantastic in that scene.
Well,
Like,
I
makeup for
mean,
him is great.
it's but that kind I mean, that's part of it too. I mean, and they talked about this with like Colin Farrell in the Batman. It's almost hard to act against makeup like that and to be able to convey facial expressions and
He
emotion
also just
when
doesn't
you're
really
under
sell
those.
like an old
Right,
person either.
when you're under that prosthesis. And so, I mean, but all in all, I mean, I was really floored by how much I got out of this film. I was
Nice.
not expecting it at all, and I think it's gotten a bit of a cult status, and I feel like it's
Mm,
deservingly so. I
I'd agree
think
with
it
that.
earns the title of a cult classic, and I'm almost curious to revisit it.
Yeah, I agree that the like by the ending it definitely won me over a bit more. I'm just like, all right, like I can see where you're going for more, but I I don't know. The first half was such a stretch for me. I feel like those were some of the worst segments in the movie. Like
Well, I will disagree there again because there was a couple of things that I thought were pretty inventive,
couple
where
things, yeah,
we're seeing like him as a child, like he takes the opportunity to go with his mother. There's just to kind of like tell more about the plot. There's like a pivotal moment in the story where he's a child and he has to make the decision to either go live with his mother or go live with his father. And there's a divorce and there's a separation in the household. And so there's like one sequence in the beginning where he's living with his mother, and it's like he constantly keeps committing suicide, and then he'll come back. And it's so like bizarre and shocking. And I mean, as like a quantum physics nerd, I mean, the quantum suicide, it's so like they'll just be having a conversation and this young teenage Jared Leto will like jump out of the window and it's
yeah,
like holy shit, you know. And I mean, it's stuff like that that really won me over by the end of it. It's like, wow, this is inventive, it has a purpose, it knows what it's trying to convey, and by the end of it, I think it conveys it perfectly. So I can't really fault it too much. Obviously, it does have its
Mm.
faults. It's not a perfect film, but overall, I really enjoyed it.
yeah. I don't know. I guess the faults just
Very
got
least,
to me somehow.
at the very least, you have to admire the ambition and scope that
Oh,
this
absolutely.
film
Oh, for
Of course
sure.
I
that
do.
this
Yeah.
film is going for. Like
Yeah.
it goes for such a really deep kind of personal journey and all the possibilities that it could lead to. And I feel like from most more often than not, it earns those emotional moments and those emotional beats. Um,
All
say what
right.
you will about Jared Leto. We've all, at this time, I don't think anybody really hated him yet. Like this was before he got into Suicide Squad and all these
Yeah.
others things at this point.
I mean,
So
I
at the
don't hate
time,
him either.
Yeah.
Well, this is,
I
I
think
mean,
he
this
can be a
is,
good actor, but I feel like
what?
the impression I get with Jared Leto, like even in his earlier films, is that he always just tries a little too hard. And because of that, I always see Jared Leto and I don't see a character, and that always pulls me off most of his performances. I think his only good performances were like Requiem for a Dream or Blade Runner 2049 because I think he was held back there. I think the director was just like, we need you to go like a little less over the top, a little less exaggerated.
Well, I
I
mean,
think that's because those roles work. And
Still
I
think
don't know.
I still think he did great in this, and he did take a break from
Yeah.
acting to go be in a band, which is funny. It's called 30 Seconds to Mars because the movie ends up on Mars at some point. Spoiler alert. They go to
Well,
Mars.
I mean,
I mean,
it
it's also
It doesn't take 30 seconds either. It takes a little while longer.
Yeah, it takes about 2 hours. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so it is worth noting. I mean, it was like, what was it? This was 2009, so just 4 or 5 years later, he wound up winning an Oscar in Dallas Buyers Club. Like,
Which I haven't seen.
this was way before, you know, we got the Super Mario accent he was doing at House of Gucci.
Yo, just crying into a car horn.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's not perfect. I think I might be a little bit generous towards it, because I had just finished watching the next film we're going to talk about, and I was like, "Holy crap! What a relief to watch this."
Spoilers for your thoughts on that.
Spoilers,
And,
but
well, I don't know. Like, it's just like sometimes I think my main problem is how it delivers the message. I don't entirely agree that it isn't ham-fisted because they literally just spell it out to you in a few scenes. And there's a couple scenes when he's in his deathbed. It's just like you're just picking. It feels like they just picked a bunch of words out of a hat. You know, like it doesn't feel
Well, I
genuine.
mean-
It doesn't feel like they know what they're talking about. It just
I
feels
mean,
like
look,
they
at
watched like a
least
Neil
it-
deGrasse Tyson special, and they're like,
Director,
"Oh, I
writer,
could use
this is
that."
Belgium. He's Belgian. He
I,
speaks French.
I've been over
I-
this.
I-
That's no excuse
I
for
mean,
me.
Okay, so
look,
wait,
I'm
no, no,
going to-
I'm
look,
getting to a point here. I like the fact that he makes fun of French movies in one line.
Oh, I'm
You
sorry.
know?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like most of the time, nothing happened like a French movie. So,
that was kind of funny.
Which-
Yeah,
I thought that was a good stab at their own culture. That's great.
yeah,
I
got a good chuckle.
I do
sorry.
like French movies. I'm gonna say that.
Yeah.
No, I do
like
too.
some French
I will
movies.
say,
Yeah.
you're talking about the dialogue. I mean, Jared Leto does not ever say true, so I'm going to give the dialogue a slight bump there.
I mean, I don't think it. I don't know. Okay, we'll get into it in a bit.
We'll get into it.
We'll
yes.
get into it.
Well, no,
But there
I
are
mean, we're
parts about it I
talking-
love. Like, there's parts about it that I love. Like, the score, I think, is the absolute best part about the movie. It fits the atmosphere really well, and like it drives like every scene perfectly well. Like, I don't think I would have enjoyed this film nearly as much without the score, if I'm being honest. And of course, I've jerked off Sarah Polley in the past. You know, she's one of my favorite Canadian filmmakers, but she is also a fantastic actress because she steals every scene she's in this movie. And
This is one of the last acting roles that she did too. She had like one other credit. She hasn't acted in anything since like
yeah, I know. I
2010,
think
so-
like Split. No, not Split. Splice was like her last movie, and then she
Splice.
just went to
Yeah.
direct it.
Ouch.
and then she just went and
Yeah.
split.
Yeah, she went and
no,
split.
I don't know if she's directed anything since. She's also an accomplished filmmaker. She made Away From Her, which is like Canada's version of The Notebook that isn't shit.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Hey,
So
I
I
was literally in the Notebook. That
I
was
mean,
literally
God,
me,
okay.
Ryan Gosling. so-
Literally, you can fix that movie. But yeah, like she's done a lot of great stories. We Tell is one of my favorite documentaries ever made. She's done a bunch of stuff for TV, and I think she's working on a film now. Actually, that has quite the cast in it that I'm looking forward to.
She was also in Existence. She was
Yep.
in Dawn of the Dead, I think, the
Yes,
2004 film,
that's
which is
right.
actually pretty good.
Yeah, I heard it's one of Zack Snyder's only not shit movies. So.
Well, I mean, we'll save that for another time. But
another time.
It's
no,
to
I
stay.
mean-
When Sarah Polley's in something, it tends to be not shit.
yeah, I
Unless you
mean,
splice.
just like this film too. I mean,
I mean, yeah, it's not shit. It's half a good movie, half a bad one. Like
well, I
again, like
disagree
it's
there.
just
I think it-
I felt like I was going through two different multiverses watching this movie because
Well, you're going through several, and one thing that I thought was interesting was if you notice the color grading of like each of the women that Jared Leto's character could, possibly wind up with. So there's like 3 women in his life that he winds up marrying in one, and then he marries another, and they kind of interact and intersect. And I thought it was interesting that like the girl in the yellow dress represents wealth and represents like money because he's chasing these sort of like there's this whole sequence where he's like robbing from this investment fund or something, and he wakes up in a bathtub and this mob guy shoots him, and then the woman in the blue dress, or the girl in the blue dress, represents like this sadness and this melancholy. And I mean, there's a whole lot of like color theory that you can read into it, and I was kind of getting into that, reading online and some video essays and stuff. And I mean, it's little details like that where you clearly see that there's a passion and a vision behind this film that ultimately, yeah, it won me over by the end.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that real
the dream
quick.
sequences, they all wear those like diamond checkered vests.
Yeah, the
very interesting
Argyle.
costumes. Yeah.
Which I wasn't sure what the name of the pattern was. Thanks for letting me know. But
Yeah.
no, I think that there's some great color theory going on here. I also wonder if this is the existential angst that polyamorous just tend to override. Like, why choose when I could have all 3?
You see my struggle here? I wanted to talk about that scene real quick because I was a big fan of that because, yeah, I love the color grading and everything. I love the idea behind it, but the women are just that emotion, and that's pretty much it. And that was such a missed opportunity for me. Like, something that a film we'll talk about later, the third film we're talking about, did a great job of, like, giving characters from other universes that, even when they have barely any screen time, it still feels like they have more depth to them than that. It's not just like, oh, this woman's sad, and that's it. Oh, this woman's a gold digger, and that's it.
By the end of the film, no, because
by the end of the film, yeah, but until then,
No, wait a minute. Let me say this, because by the end of the film, when he wakes up at the lighthouse, and the girlfriend is there, I felt that. I thought that was really a nice emotional arc.
But I didn't feel anything for that.
I disagree. I thought it
because
worked,
they were so one-dimensional. I just didn't feel anything.
They weren't one-dimensional. She had a character. Like, they struggled together. There was that whole backstory there where their parents were constantly fighting. I mean, I feel like and they didn't want to be married, and it was like they were being forced to be brother and sister. And I mean, I think you're not giving this film enough credit. I mean, I think it tries.
Like, maybe I need to watch it again.
For the most part, it succeeds. Yeah.
And
bro, I'm stuck in this situation.
Yeah, exactly. I'm literally between a rock and a hard place on this movie. I don't know. It's just, again, it feels like it was done by 2 different people. One knew what they were doing, and one didn't. One half the film feels more competent than the other.
It was written and directed by one French guy.
I know. I'm a crazy person that has a tinfoil over his head. I'm just saying that.
I wonder.
Yeah.
It was actually his doppelganger from another universe that came in.
There's Jaco Van Dormel. There's Vaco Jan. All
right, I'm gonna stop you. Can we do ratings?
Let's do interpretation. We're the pretentious assets. Let's do interpretations.
Sure.
So I wanted to do my own interpretation of the movie, and I think I am gonna go with your lifeline theory. Like, I think it is just a man who's been through a car accident, just picturing what his life could have been like with all the different choices he's made over life. And that's kind of how I interpreted it, because anybody who's been in that point in their lives, just not knowing where else to go, even if you're perfectly fine, even if you're just sitting on a hospital bed, there's not exactly much else you get to do there. So all of these thoughts just begin running through your head that seem kind of pointless at first, but all kind of come together to show you a different meaning to life. And yeah, it did connect with me at the end. I just wish more of the film did. I wish more of the film was as good as the ending.
My interpretation is,
I'm a hack.
Maybe a little more literal, but maybe not quite as. I feel like the movie is somewhat taking place in the mind of that young boy in the train station but I think the real ending of the film is him going through all of the choices in his life up until he meets the young girl that that his mother marries her father, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like the end of the movie is actually him retracing his steps to the lighthouse where he meets her. I think that's the real ending, is them winding up together. That to me was like the ending, because that also makes sense too when everything starts going in reverse at the end. It's like
that's
you don't have
you see your life
The
flash
reverse
before your
entropy.
eyes. Yeah.
yeah, no, and I mean I think that also kind of ties into the fact that like when the old man dies, it's like he's not having to worry anymore, because now he's figured out what went wrong in his life and what he can do to go back and you know you know what I mean. Like I mean there's also that whole thing about
Sorry, you
Lost
cut
you
out
there.
there. We lost you.
him to meet him there. So that was kind of my interpretation. What about you, Devin?
I cut you off there a little bit. I don't know if you wanted to re-summarize.
No. I mean, I feel like that ending where he's retracing his steps and he winds up at the lighthouse. I feel like that's the true ending. And I would argue that, I was kind of talking about how that the old man makes the statement that, he has to die by a certain time, like at 5 o'clock. And I wonder if that's maybe the time that she told him to meet her at the lighthouse. That was my interpretation.
Me in Montauk.
Yeah, right.
Meet me in Montauk. So if I had to sum up this movie, it's once there was a kid who got into an accident and couldn't come to school, but when he finally came back, his hair had turned from black into bright white. He said it was from when the car smashed so hard. I'm just quoting a lyric from a Canadian song that no one knows about called Crash Test Dummies.
What a story, Mark.
Ratings.
Thanks. But no. I this film just shows how indecision is a bitch. But no matter what you choose, things hopefully work out in the end. You just have to be active in your choices and see every possibility as a new opportunity to turn a new leaf. Also, polyamory doesn't work very well. Don't try it.
He has plenty of experience.
We're not kink shaming. You do you. These views and opinions do not reflect.
Yeah, Devin's had plenty of experience, so he can tell you.
Like, go have fun. Make sure everyone's on board. But it'll be short lived. Just enjoy yourselves. But yeah, just
well, I think this was a final thought. I think this was a beautiful film that is definitely better than the sum of its parts. It comes together in a satisfying way. It has a clear, concise message, unlike another film we'll get into. And yeah, it's an 8 out of 10 for me.
6 out of 10.
Oh.
Wow.
Why? Hey, come on. 6 out of 10's all right. It's decent.
I'd love to bridge that
You're
gap.
You're not going to bump that up to a 6.9?
Nope. I feel comfortable at 6.
I'll bridge this gap and I'll give it a 6.9.
Yay!
Okay.
Although, honestly though, I could bump that up to an 8. I did think it was still emotionally resonant.
Yeah, let's go for an 8. Come on.
Let's not.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it an 8. I'll save my 6.9 for later. Don't worry.
Okay, good.
I know. Yeah, which one?
Well, speaking of 6.9.
Speaking of being nice, Cloud Atlas, directed by the Wachowskis and Tom Tykwer, was a very ambitious follow-up to a book of the same name. It was made in 2012. Yep, 2012. I'm reading that right. I was totally prepared for this episode, you guys. Couldn't you tell? So, Cloud Atlas. My relationship with the Wachowskis. Not the biggest fan, I'll admit. I definitely get the appeal of a lot of their works, but it doesn't really resonate with me personally. What's Cloud Atlas about? So, Cloud Atlas is about 6 intertwined stories over the years. Did I cut out?
Let's start again. Let's rewind the tape.
All right, so Cloud Atlas is a very interesting movie about 6 different intertwined stories that connect one way or another, but mostly tie into the theme of, love conquers hate, and hate kind of ripples out through time and society, and all of that good stuff. So
What is
it's
this?
6 different lives. There's a dystopian future where Tom Hanks has to get his child to safety by bringing Halle Berry to a strange little device up in the mountains. There's a story about Ben Whishaw, a piano player who has to play this piano song for a very oppressive and angry old man. There's also a story set in another dystopian future, where it's set in a dystopian view of. I feel like I'm gonna offend a lot of people by saying this. Is it China or Japan? I'm
It
really
is.
sorry.
It's Korea, I believe.
Korea. Okay,
Ne-
I didn't get
Neo's soul.
Neo
Neo Soul.
Soul. That's correct. Where like everybody has to be a certain way, and love is kind of forbidden in that society as well. There's another one where Jim Broadbent is friends with a mafioso who gets him in trouble, and he has to go into hiding. That story is hilarious. I don't care what you guys say. And also, last but not least, there's a white savior slavery story. That's the worst story of the bunch. Is this movie perfect? No, not by any means. Does it have Asian face? Yes. Does it have 2 arguably weaker stories? Also, yes. Do I think this is one of the most human, profound, and beautifully shot movies done by the Wachowskis? Yes. And I don't. It's very rough around the edges. It's very flawed. But I don't know. There's just something about this movie that just touches with me personally and connects with me. And I've always thought it was kind of underrated. And fuck you, this movie is not boring. I'm sorry,
Okay.
you're wrong, but this movie
Here's
is anything but boring. I
all
think
right.
that's the least you could say about it.
Okay. I wanna jump out here because here's the thing. Okay, and I feel like we reviewed all 4 Matrix movies not that long ago,
Correct.
and there was something that I kind of wanted to get out. But when we reviewed those movies, Ian was like, "Oh, Matrix bad." No one
No,
had to say
I
anything.
was trying to.
So,
Oh, no one
so
was allowed to say. Oh, all
here's
right.
so here's what I tried to say that episode, and I promise it will relate to Cloud Atlas because obviously these are the same filmmakers. So with the Matrix, the very first Matrix, it does a good job of being grounded in its action, and it's like it's almost street level. It's like it's very Bruce Lee, it's very kung fu, it's very fluid, and there are moments where it gets a little over the top, but it still has this believability of like Hong Kong style fighting. And I think something that the sequels lost sight of a bit was that as the story progressed and Neo got more and more powerful, you didn't have that human element of fighting. There was something where, Neo was essentially becoming this like Christ-like figure, and the battle sequences were almost like it's almost like watching Dragon Ball Z. There was that whole fight scene in the second film where they just had to keep Neo from outside of the car chase because they knew if you added him in, it's like he ultimately wins. And the third Matrix film was arguably the worst because it leaned into that like just CGI mess of like fighting, and honestly not unlike what we see today in a lot of Marvel films. And so my first nitpick about Cloud Atlas is somehow the action sequences in this film are even worse than the third Matrix film.
Screw
They
you.
are
Screw
they
you.
are
They are
so
not worse than that.
lame
I can
and
tell what's
so
happening in these action scenes. That
but
automatically makes it better.
they're somehow worse because they're still street level, but they're so lame in their execution. I mean,
What?
I honestly disagree. I think a lot of the cinematography and the direction in this film is kind of flat.
I
Uh,
disagree immensely.
a
But
lot
that's
of the
interesting.
color choices in this film, I mean, come on.
The color
There's like
choices
that
are
whole.
gorgeous. Like I love
I
like the neon
don't know
colors
that I
of the
agree with
Tokyo
that.
sequence. I love how every segment kind of has like a different look and feel to it and a different genre. I thought it looked beautiful. Like I thought that was one of the best parts about it. And even a lot of people hate it are just like, yeah, all right. Like it at least has like a memorable aesthetic to it. Like it's very well
I
shot.
don't know that I agree with that. I feel like
That's
a lot of
interesting.
the tension and a lot of the camera direction that we have seen the Wachowskis do in so much more interesting ways and better
But
was lacking
the
here.
characters in these frames just felt so much familiar. That's one thing problem I kind of had with the Wachowski's filmography. Even Bound, which I watched recently, kind of suffered to this to a certain extent. My degree is that there's a weird like stiltedness to like the characters and the way they perform their characters. Like it always just feels like a little bit off from what it should be. And there were plenty of moments in this where I'm just like, wow, like they're actually talking like humans. Like that's a big problem I had with their films in the past, but there are several scenes in this where I'm like, wow, like the characters in these frames actually feel like people. It's not just style over substance. There's a little bit of substance that the actors are bringing to the table. And yeah, we'll talk about the Asian face in a bit, and that's ridiculous and probably the worst part about this movie. But I think like a lot of the actors did a great job. Like even though some of their material is admittedly a little bit stupid at points, as a theater kid, I've always been a huge sucker for actors like playing different versions of different characters, which is taken to the next level in the next movie we're talking about. But here, I think they do a pretty compelling job with their characters overall. Like this is the only Halle Berry performance I like. Jim Broadbent and Hugo Weaving are great as usual. And it just felt natural. And I kind of wonder if part of that is because Tom Tykwer was involved. And he was just like, no, Wachowskis, they need to act like people. We need to bring like more emotion and vulnerability to these characters. And I think he did a great job of that.
Well, I'm okay. First of all, I'm gonna stop you there because Halle Berry has done a lot of good performances. I mean, she was in
Well,
Monsters Balls. She
I
was
haven't
in.
seen that yet, in
I mean,
fairness.
even something like The Call, or you know, something like that, which were kind of more low budget fare. I mean, she was good in John Wick 3. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's not like a perfect actress. She's been in a lot of crappy films like the X-Men, but Catwoman, I mean, but I don't think she's a bad actress, and I certainly wouldn't call this her best performance. I think she does fine with the
I
material.
think she does a great job.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
All right, Devin.
Here's the thing. Yeah, let's bring Devin in here before I go into it.
Yeah,
But
me too. Come on, Devin. What do you think? Pick a side.
Don't make me choose.
I'm
This
sorry.
is like my second time watching it, and I did enjoy it more on the second go. I did find it quite confusing the first time I watched it. And I do think that there's a lot of great elements in it. I don't know if they all quite connect and resonate on the grand scale like they were going for. And admittedly, while the makeup effects are quite good, the yellow face is a bit distracting.
Yeah.
But I also don't know how else they would have conveyed that same idea of these characters sort of, or like the same soul of these characters traversing different time periods.
well, so
With
in the book, I was reading this that in the book they all have the same birthmark that identifies
right,
them. Whereas in the movie, they decided they made it literal, where like every character is playing the same character.
Which is fine, but here's my thing about that. All right, did you have to get a white guy to do that? You could have had like Asian characters connecting with several different stories. Like Keith David
Well,
doesn't show up in every story.
like
He only shows
if
up
you
in one.
casted an
Like you could
Asian
have done that
actor
with a
that looks
different
kind
actor.
of similar and gave them the birthmark, and they did a terrific performance, probably could have done it.
Yeah,
Um,
like
but
that's what's weird to me.
at the same time, it's like, well, we already have this guy, and we can just use makeup. But at the same time,
well,
It looks off. And
I
Hugo
mean,
Weaving's a great actor, but he can't.
I'll give them credit. I mean, it's not. it's not as egregious as something like Mickey Rooney and Breakfast at Tiffany's, simply
Like,
because stuff like that is coming across more mockingly, and I think this was more earnest in what it was trying to do for the wrong
Yeah.
reasons, obviously, but like I don't think their heart was in the wrong place. Whereas something like, Breakfast at Tiffany's or like John Wayne the Conqueror was like definitely coming from a place of ill intent in a way.
Yeah, this was just
Um,
like a bad decision. It was like a cool
yeah.
concept. Like, let's have all of these actors in this, like, different stories,
Well,
but
and honestly, I had to Google it because I was confused when I first saw Hugo Weaving. They were in the future, so I was like, "Oh, he's like Spock." And then I was like,
he's
"Oh
like
no,
Spock.
he's like some kind of Vulcan or something." And then
Yeah,
I was like, "Oh
point
my
out,
god!"
I have to point out something completely random that I just noticed, but I just want you guys to appreciate this. So I just, as a joke, was quoting lyrics from this song to reference the last film. The
Yeah,
second verse of that song talks about a girl having birthmarks on her body. Uh,
huh.
yeah.
You're really
that
not
is
letting
actually
this Canadian rock song go. I mean, we
no,
need to
no,
move on. But
it totally fits. Just listen to it later.
Just
Like,
happens
just
to
trust
be.
me.
okay, I'll
Yeah.
anyway.
Anyways, but I think one
But this
element of
kind
this
of
movie that I kind of prefer over Mr. Nobody and Everything Ever All at Once does this too, is that it feels more tongue in cheek and goofy. Like, it doesn't take itself too seriously. I think a big part of that is like the Jim
you
Broadbent
don't
story where he
think
plays the retired.
everything everywhere all at once is goofy?
No, it is. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Okay. Okay, all
these two
right.
films did that well, whereas
Well,
Mr. Nobody maybe took itself a little too seriously for me.
Oh,
But
okay, I
these
see.
movies kind of embrace the absurdity a little bit more. I think that's one aspect
mm,
I do
Well,
appreciate.
this is
Wachowski films are goofy to a certain extent, and I think that style does actually kind of work here for me.
well, okay. So, if I had a gun to my head and they were like, you have to review Cloud Atlas in 2 words or less. And Ian, I know you're gonna hate me, but I think the
That's all
the
right.
phrase that keeps coming back is like failing upwards. I
Yeah,
understand that this is like, I mean, I think it's a beautiful message. I admire the Wachowskis for even attempting this.
yeah, no
It's
kidding.
very ambitious. I can't think of another film that attempts this, for better or worse, arguably. But this was based on a novel. It's a novel that was floating around Hollywood for some time and was, an award-winning piece of fiction that was almost thought of as unfilmable. And so, yeah, I mean, I admire the fact they even tried it. And I think there's a lot of good ideas here, but I don't think the execution comes together in a way. I mean, you know,
what was
the
it that fell flat for you specifically? Was it the true?
it was, well, I mean,
That's
the
stupid. All
dialogue.
right, I'll
Yes,
give
I
you
mean
that. Like, that dialogue
the
was stupid.
dialogue is so bad in
I,
several scenes. There's a
I,
couple of sequences where like characters' decisions don't make a lot of sense. There's a whole like 1970s crime story that's going on, almost like a Foxy Brown in a way with Halle Berry's
mm,
character, and
yeah,
she has to team up with Keith David to take down
which is
this
incredible.
shady, nuclear energy deal. And
Imagine
Tom
that was the movie
Hanks.
you wanted to see. Like,
No,
just
no,
that.
it's no. What's funny is though Tom Hanks, he makes the statement to her. He's like, "Well, there's no way to win here," or something. That's like, "I could lose my job, or millions of people could die." Like, come on, like your job is more important in this situation. How is that even a comparison? And it's little things like that. I mean, I
But that's one
disagree.
moment, though. And, like, yeah,
I
there's moments of
think
dumb dialogue and weird character decisions, but I think the majority of this film works for me.
I mean, and that's fine. I mean, I feel like because the dialogue comes off silly in a couple of places, it's like there are some awkward line deliveries.
I
I'd honestly say there's a couple of
Not be
performances that
subjected
are
to this criminal abuse.
there's a couple of performances that are
I
better than
have to
others.
say, I have to say, I love how they show in this movie how movies tend to romanticize like historical moments. Like you see the story of this guy going up against the nursing home, and it's kind of an awkward kind of, and an absurd situation. But then it's dramatized in a film like half a century later, and it's made to look a lot much more heroic. It looks like one of those heritage moments commercials that we would
But
see here again, right?
it's like it's I don't know, man. It did not come together by the end for me, and I really wanted it to. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this may be the longest film as far as runtime that we've reviewed on the
Not
podcast. I know
true.
we've talked
The Good, the
about the
Bad, the
English.
Ugly, I think is longer.
Uh,
Go on.
yeah, I think. Well, I know this is longer than The English Patient. This
Yeah.
is longer than Blade Runner 2049, and I felt every minute of the
I
runtime.
disagree. Like, I think this film is not boring, if anything. I don't know.
I
It's like, I can't explain it. Like, I'll admit it has its dumb moments, but there are, I don't know, several discussions and moments that are like genuine and sweet. Like, I love the scene when Jim Broadbent like reunites with Susan Sarandon for the first time. I thought that was great. Like, I love like the chemistry between Ben Whishaw and his loved one actually felt genuine and not super forced and preachy like I was expecting it to. The music is great in that sequence too, and how that kind of ties the whole movie together. I There's so much about this film that works for me that it's the perfect definition of a film that's absolutely better than the sum of its parts. But it really does come together at the end for me, and by the end, like no matter all of the faults along the way, no matter how many weird Vulcan phases I saw throughout the experience, it all just comes together in a collective whole. At least for
well,
me.
and that's fine. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't even dislike the Wachowskis. I think they certainly have an interesting style and an interesting,
Yeah. They're very
vision.
ambitious, which is better
They
than a lot of
are,
the
and
shit heap directors we get these days.
here's the thing. I actually did a little bit of extra credit for this film because I didn't want to come on here and just like shit on this film for its, its problems. But I went ahead and watched
Citing your
a couple.
sources.
Yeah, no, I I went and watched a couple of episodes of Sense8 on Netflix, which was the Wachowskis' limited series that they actually did with what was his name? Tom Tiker. Um, Tim Tiker. I
Tom
don't know.
Tiker, yeah.
Yeah,
Tim,
so I
yeah.
mean, they did that show, and I watched a couple of episodes of that, and I was like, "Wow, this is what Cloud Atlas was supposed to be." Like, I think that nails what they were going for here. It's way more refined, and a lot of the characters are very interesting. There's like this entire segment, even in the first episode or so, where there's like this trans woman who's actually played by a trans actress, but she's like bullied at a lesbian like party or something because she's like not a real woman, and it's so bizarre. Like I would never have even thought of that.
Yeah, that's something you never really see addressed enough of in media.
Doesn't come across like preachy. It actually,
Yeah.
it's kind of.
Here. You keep cutting in and out.
Yeah,
of my
you
end.
keep coming in and out for me, Steven. Oh, man. Steven, you cut out again.
Oops.
Bring
I
kind
did
of
it
those.
again.
Yeah, kind of those boundaries of like race and gender and what makes us all human and what makes us connected. And I feel like that, even in just the handful of episodes that
God, you're kind in and out. Sorry, mate.
I do, um, but yeah, I mean, I was
Yeah, Steven, can you hear me?
um, unfortunately.
Yeah, sorry, Steven. You cut out for the majority of that conversation.
Oh, really?
Sorry, I
Okay.
had to laugh
Yeah.
there. But
Well,
it's like Ian's like, Stephen, can you hear me? And you're like, unfortunately.
No, I can't. I want to hear his
I just had to laugh
thoughts.
at
Come
that.
on.
No,
I was just
that's
saying.
what it sounded like on my end. It was just too funny.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's funny. I watched a handful of episodes of Sense8, the show on Netflix
Yeah.
the Wachowskis did.
Yep.
And, there was this whole sequence in that. And I mean, I just watched a handful of episodes, but there was this whole sequence in that in the first, pilot or whatever. And there's like this sequence where a trans woman who's played by this trans actress, she's getting bullied at this like party for lesbians because she's like not a real woman or something. And it's so bizarre. Like, I would never have thought of that, but you can tell that maybe, the Wachowskis are drawing on some experience that they might have had. And it doesn't even come across like preachy. It just fits the story. And it's about these like 8 people from all different walks of life across race and gender and sexuality, and they wake up with superpowers. And it's all this commentary about like, gender and what makes us human and all of these things that I think they were trying to explore with this film, but didn't quite come together by the end. And I feel like in just a handful of episodes, I think that kind of shows me that this is like the undercooked version in a way.
The beta test.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend Sense8. Unfortunately, this did not come together in a cohesive, satisfying way by the end of it. I remember.
I think Cloud Atlas. I think it works better than a lot of the other follow-up films that they've done. Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Matrix Resurrections.
Yeah.
But I mean, check out Sense8. It's been on my list for quite some time.
No, I was pleasantly surprised by that, but I mean, I disagree. I with Ian, unfortunately. I mean, I think there's a lot of room for improvement by the end of this, and yeah, I mean, I can understand where it would work for some people. It reminds me of like basically Mark Kermode's review of this film, where he's talking about like it's so ambitious, and it's like you feel sorry that it didn't work because you want it to work. It's such a cool idea, and it ultimately fails. But it's like failing upwards. It's the only way I know to describe it.
What would you rate it?
Progresses us further, despite
Yeah.
its despite crashing and burning.
Yeah. I'm gonna give this like a 5 out of 10.
I'm giving.
How comfortable is that fence you're sitting on?
Yeah, well, I originally went with a 4, but I'm gonna be a little more generous, just for Ian's sake.
Thanks.
I
mean, rate it whatever you want, man. You don't have to rate it for me.
I mean, it's honestly, it's more like a 4. I mean, it is. I could probably go 5 or 6, but I really felt the runtime, and yeah, a lot of the costumes are pretty out there too. It also took me quite a bit to realize that was Hugo Weaving as Nurse Ratched.
That was I will never unsee. Like,
that was funny.
Being Nurse Ratched, and it's the best thing. That's the best part.
Come on, that was funny. Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of funny.
All right.
Okay.
This I was finding between a 7.5 and an 8, and I'm gonna give it an 8. It just.
Okay.
I think it's a beautiful, profound message, explored mostly well. At some points, it's really not explored all that well. It's rough around the edges, but man, it does have a great center at its core. I don't know. This movie always has a special place in my heart for me. I also saw it in theaters, so maybe that gives me a bit of bias towards it too. Just the spectacle.
Well, I remember there was a lot of hype surrounding this film. I mean,
then it kind of died out. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there was like a 7-minute trailer that almost went viral back in the day. Like it was
a great trailer.
Very hyped, and then it kind of just faded.
Yeah, it also didn't make much at the box office, unfortunately.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
It's pretty polarizing, when it came out from TIFF. I was rewatching Chris Stuckman's review at the time, and he went to Toronto Film Festival um, at the time when it came out, and people have been just wanting to hear his thoughts on it because he was one of the first people to see it, basically, and the vibe was very polarized even at the time. Um, and he was on the fence about it himself, um, which I am also going to be on the fence. I've found it
Boo.
very cozy myself. Um, I think you know what my rating is. I'm giving it a 6.9.
You and
Hey,
your fucking fence.
we're
Uh,
we're both kind of on the fence.
speaking of shoving things up your ass.
Great segue.
Hey,
Take it away, Devon. Spoiler alert, by the way. And I have to iterate. Please, if you're watching this review and you haven't seen the movie yet, do not listen to this review before watching it. Watch the movie and come back. I cannot stress that enough. Going blind. Sorry, carry on, Devon.
Yes. Spoilers inbound. We are talking about everything, everywhere, all at once. It just sounds like. Yeah,
I
that's
thought
my
we were talking about Rakakuni.
I thought we
Oh
were
yeah.
talking about In the Mood for Love.
Oh
I
yeah,
thought we were talking about
hot
what was
dog
that?
fingers. I don't know.
Yeah, the hot dog fingers or the fucking pinky of fury. That was
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
so this is a movie came out this year, and it's gotten much praise, much hype, much word of mouth. It is currently A24's highest grossing film, which I think is quite an accomplishment. And this was all based on a limited release, and due to word of mouth, it got grew in popularity by demand, and was eventually released wide everywhere. Um, and I saw it within the first few weeks that I think it had come out. It showed up at the Landmark Cinemas in London, and I cannot understate that the theater experience going to this was a vibe, which is, you know, what the kids say these days. I'm trying to stay relevant, but no.
He's hip. He's happening.
It,
Um,
if you didn't see this in theater, I hate to say, I feel like you might have missed out on something. Just experiencing this for the first time with other people and just the reactions from the crowd, I think absolutely adds to the experience in watching this film. Even if you just watch it with some friends of yours and
Mm.
you guys are like having a good time, this film is a great time. This is the I think second feature film or uh yeah,
Sec.
from the Daniels, which is Daniel Kwan, Daniel Scheinhardt. They previously were known for Swiss Army Man, which I remember seeing back in the day, and I thought, oh well, this is a quirky, delightful, gross movie. And I watched it once and I enjoyed it. I didn't think it was anything too special beyond that, but it did have some oddly uplifting moments. Considering that it had another Daniel Radcliffe basically just being a reanimated farting corpse throughout the whole thing, and that was the main selling point. Um, but it had some oddly uplifting moments in spite of that, and I thought it was pretty good. But I only watched it once. It wasn't like a life-changing movie. Uh,
well,
Unlike
I do
this,
think. Sorry, I was just going to interject and say I think one of the Daniels also did another
Oh,
A24
that's right.
film,
The Death of Dick Long. Yeah.
The Death
the,
of Dick Long, which
That's
was
it.
which
about horse
Mm.
sex. But well,
oh no,
which we should talk about at some point.
It's supposed to be good. Yeah.
R.I.P. Mr. Hands.
Uh,
We're not getting into that today, thank God. Um, so to succinctly describe this movie and not also overpraise it in the same breath is a bit of a challenge. Uh, but fuck it, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. This is the epitome, this is the zenith of everything cinema was meant to become. Uh, that was my initial letterbox review, and I wrote it, and I stick by it. It's also the best Ratatouille sequel we could ever have hoped for. Um, this so you know I'm gonna hone this down. I'm gonna dial this back. So basically, the core of the story and what makes it work also is that it's about a struggling Chinese family dealing with generational trauma and miscommunication. Um, Michelle Yeoh plays Evelyn Wang, um, and her husband, played by Kei Kwan, in his first on-screen performance in over 30 years. If you don't know, he was the kid from Goonies and
He
from
was Short Round and Data.
yeah, he was Short Round in Indiana Jones Temple of Doom and Data and Goonies, and he hasn't been on screen in an acting role in over 30 years. He's been behind the scenes doing all kinds of stuff, including stunt coordination. And seeing him back, I didn't recognize that was him. When I first saw him, like, who is this bargain bin Jackie Chan? And I feel bad that that
Whoa.
was my initial thought because when I found out who it was,
Wow.
and when I saw,
Bruh.
and no, but when I saw him act, when I saw him perform, I'm like, man, this guy is like on par, if not better than Jackie. Like, who is this guy? And then I realized who it was, and I'm like, man, it's like seeing an old friend you haven't seen in years, and they all grew up. It was really touching actually. Um, but
Well,
man,
I
so
will say, I mean, again, just to interject, this role that Michelle Yao beautifully plays in this film, it was actually written for Jackie Chan, and he
Mm-hmm.
turned it down. So it was rewritten to be a woman, and that was how Michelle Yao got on board.
he really missed out on this because
He did, yeah, he did.
this is an amazing film, and the reason Keiki Kwan got on board with this is that he saw Crazy Rich Asians and he got serious FOMO because the reason he hadn't been acting in over 30 years is he just wasn't getting gigs. There weren't any roles for him after him being a child, which really sucks and really says a lot about Hollywood and society. Um, but I'm glad that we're got to a point that we're past that and he's able to get it. And literally, when he signed up be to act again, when he called an agent friend of his asking if he could get him back into a role, this was the first job that he got after like 2 weeks. And man, I think he deserves like a best supporting actor for this. Like, I
Yes.
really don't care about the Oscars anymore, but he deserves best supporting actor for this role because I thought he was exceptional. Really, they all deserve Oscars for this movie. Again, it's hard to describe this movie without overpraising it, because at its core, it's about a struggling Chinese family who's dealing with generational trauma and an IRS audit, and this unravels this whole plot about the multiverse and how she's the only person that can save the thing, which really I think is a very apt metaphor for having an existential crisis when you're at this point in life. And a lot of this is also inspired by the director's own uh, diagnosis of having ADHD in his adulthood. And this is the kind of mental overload that one can experience when they, I guess, when they experience ADHD and also have just a lot of anxiety about life in general when everything seems to be falling apart.
Well, I mean, I'll just kind of jump in here, and it's funny. I had a buddy of mine who messaged me about this film when the trailer dropped, and he was like, "Ah, "Man, I'm not really into A24. I really want to see this though because I love Michelle Yao. Like I really want this to be good." And he wound up seeing it in theaters, which he lives in another state because unfortunately I missed out on the theater experience. The
Ah.
closest theater that was playing this was over an hour and a half away. I will kind of criticize A24 a bit there because the distribution was not too great on this.
A24
Uh,
sucks at their distribution in general.
yeah, it does. Yeah. But regardless, I mean, my friend messaged me like a day after he saw it, and he was like, "Oh my God, you have to watch this." And I was like, "Is it good?" And he was like, "No, it's incredible. It's so cheesy and over the top, and it just works." And I don't know, like it. And I wound up putting this in my review too because I kind of shared the same sentiment. Like, it shouldn't work, but it does. And I mean, it is so I don't know. It's so beautiful in what it's trying to accomplish, and I think by the end of it, it does that in spades. I mean, it's kind of using the multiverse as a way to explore these family dynamics and this kind of like generational you know, there's the daughter
Trauma.
who's kind of trauma. I mean, the daughter is you know, struggling with her identity, and you know, the old man is very set in his ways, played by James Hong,
The
who
legendary
is,
James
oh
Hong,
my
like one of the
God,
most
Big
prolific
Trouble in
actors.
Little China.
I think him just being here absolutely validates and solidifies like the status of this film. Like this
Well,
crosses the
I mean,
generational gap.
oh yeah, it elevates it in a way that, I mean, is just, I mean, it's breathtaking. Again, I'm kind of falling into that thing that Devon was talking about, where it's hard not to praise this film. Um, you know, I will say, if I had to nitpick, and this is a very minor nitpick, but you know, if I did, I think the 2 hour and 20 minute runtime might be a little bit much for some people.
Oh.
Not me specifically, but I think some people might struggle with it because it kind of it does kind of lean into being a little bit too silly or a little bit too goofy at times. And I mean, it wasn't a problem for me, but I could see where someone could kind of, you know, get almost exhausted. You know what I mean? Like, it
Well,
is,
I
the
will say
title
this.
is literal. It is
Oh, it's
everything
it's very
everywhere.
literal. It's a very exhausting film, but it's also one that I wanted to rewatch almost immediately after it was over, just because of the catharsis of the way everything paid off and the emotional investment you had for it. You just wanted to experience it again, even though it's oh so overwhelming even on the first go. I will say though, watching this with my parents, they definitely kind of checked out whenever with the dildos and the butt plugs when those popped out.
Yeah.
That's a
Just made
scene. Yeah, go on.
just made them immediately uncomfortable,
Yeah.
which understandable. Um, but
Yeah.
actually, this was a funny story. So I remember we were getting to the theater. My mom was driving from across town from work, and she got in a bit late. And I felt really bad for her because she missed all the setup in like the first 20 minutes, which is so important to getting what the rest of the film is about. And
Yeah.
grounding it in a familiar reality.
Yeah.
And so she was just like completely
What's
checked out. Like
yeah.
she didn't get what was going on. And I'm like, it's about this. And I had to like explain it. But when rewatching it, she finally saw the first 20 minutes and she liked it a lot better the second time because she saw the whole thing, which is great. We're bridging gaps in our own family dynamic here, via this movie, which is awesome. Um, so, oh
Fantastic.
man, there's just so much to talk about with this film. It's hard to
I
know
know.
where to even begin.
I think this is the first film we all agree on. I also fucking love
Wow.
this movie. It's there was something you said in your review, Stephen, that I 100% agree with, where it never apologizes for its audacity. It never apologizes for being so absurd and over the top, while at the
Oh,
same
definitely.
time being completely self-aware in a way that just isn't obnoxious. One of the funniest scenes in the movie is quite literally Evelyn just explaining the plot to her family and them just being like, what the fuck? Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's really stupid.
Well, yeah, no, and I mean, I think if this tried to be like too wink, wink, nudge, nudge,
Oh,
it
yeah.
would not work.
If this was
Like
like,
cynical.
and
If it
yeah.
was cynical with its
Or if it was
self-awareness,
like,
then it would be. Where this feels very heartfelt and sincere, which is
no,
so
and this is this.
refreshing in a movie these days.
I know.
Oh my
Well, and
God, I can't understate that.
this was something that a buddy of mine brought up, where it's like, it doesn't, it, like, basically it starts the movie, you've got like 30 minutes to just get through, like, these are the characters, this is just like, okay, she owns a Chinese laundromat, and like her husband is short round, and his name in the film is even funnier, it's Waymond,
Yeah.
which I thought
Wait,
was kind of a
But not
funny
Raymond.
name, like.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I love how they make fun of the way, they might mispronounce English words. Like
no, it is,
I feel terrible as a white guy, finding those jokes funny, but the fact that they're making that joke, it's like, oh,
yeah,
it's okay,
You're not the
it's okay to
joke.
find
Yeah.
that funny then. Like
Yeah.
they're
yeah, no, it feels endearing in a way. It never feels like mean spirited, and it doesn't feel misguided like what Cloud Atlas was doing either. Like, it just feels natural.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, this is what my buddy was talking about. It's like, it basically, after the first 30 minutes or so of setup, it just goes, okay, strap in. This is what we're doing now. It's like, and I mean, I think it just, yeah, it doesn't apologize for itself. It's not meta. It's not trying to insist that it's clever. It's not trying to be in on the joke. It's just saying, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going about it.
Deal with it.
Like, deal with it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, just
Deal
get
with
on
it.
board now.
Exactly.
You know, and
I think that this film shows such commitment to the gag and all the ideas that it presents, even like the dumb, like what would be considered like a dumb throwaway joke or a dumb throwaway line gets so committed to hard throughout it. And there's like a set of like I keep saying as a joke like Ratatouille, which is a whole thing where Michelle Yeoh is trying to explain to her family what's going on with them when
and
they're being
she,
controlled by people from other universes. And
Now
it's just such a
we're
thing
cooking.
where, like, I don't know about your mom or other people when they just like misremember titles of things, and
yes, yeah.
and but then it's like Ratatouille is a thing. Like that actually comes up as like a puppet and a visual gag, and they even have Randy Newman voicing it. Like I thought that was a throwaway joke, and the fact that they actually commit to it and have a whole side plot dedicated to Ratatouille was like one of the best things I've ever seen. Just commitment to the gag,
Yeah.
and
Well, no,
also it also
yeah.
validates people who misremember titles because maybe they're remembering what it's called in another universe that they're from.
Yeah.
Well, it kind of plays into the Mandela effect of that. Like,
Exactly.
and that's
That's what I
another
was going for.
that's another thing too. It's like there's a random gag where like there's a we kind of talked about this too, where it's like there's a universe where everybody has hot dogs for fingers, and they actually make a point to show like the beginning of time, like a 2001 homage where the Neanderthal with hot dog hands kills the original missing link. And so from then on, humanity just evolved into these creatures with like hot dogs for hands. And it's
Couldn't
so,
breathe
I
when
mean, the
that scene came up. I was just dead. Like
no, I know, but it's like they don't like it is. It's so committed to the bit that like it's not just enough to throw away. Okay, yeah, it's random. Here's some people with like hot dog fingers. It's like no, this is the beginning of time.
Yeah, and
It's
we're
like
gonna have like
monkey
development
cavemen.
and an arc
Yeah,
and a relationship, and it's
yeah,
also gonna be like a
the whole
funny
emotional
spoof
arc
of
that ties
Carol.
into it.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like all of the side stories. I wanted to mention this earlier. All the side stories have so much depth to them because, like you said, they aren't like random side stories. Like these are stories with emotional arcs and conflict, and it all gets worked out by the end of the story because all of these stories come together and she's experiencing all of these stories to convey the message that the overall film is going to through. Like I did this film have like graphs and charts, like just having everything connect together. Every single character feels like they matter and have
Absolutely had
personality.
to have.
They must have pulled like an Edgar Wright and just have this massive flow chart because everything just feels like it matters. Like even like this the dog lady. The dog lady is not a one-off joke. She has a hilarious fight scene and she has a heartwarming end at the end of the movie where she finds someone she loves that she brought up at the beginning of the movie that she broke up with her boyfriend, and then she finds someone that she can connect with at the end of the movie. The dumb dog lady has more character development than most characters in fucking Marvel
well, and
movies.
she's also
I like
played
that
like
her name is Big Nose, which is like this.
yeah. Well,
It's what Michelle Yeoh calls her in her own language, so she doesn't know that she's saying, which is totally something that I think some people do is
oh
they'll
yeah.
call you something derogatory in their own language because they know you don't understand it.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Does Buddy want to go for a walk?
that she's
Oh my
also
god.
played by Jenny Slate, who
Yep.
has been in a number of other A24 productions. I think she was just recently Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which just came out.
Which is
So
supposed to be really good.
yeah, I mean, no, I mean, but yeah, I agree with what you guys are saying. It's like every single thing that comes in to play is resolved in some way. It has a purpose. It does kind of lean into the absurdity of it, And yeah, I mean, I'll concede that there are some moments that are like, LOL, so random, like Rick and Morty kind of humor.
But
But by the end of it,
yeah,
it's hard to even be mad at. You know what I mean? Like
exactly. And the
it just
jokes move,
works.
yeah, sorry. And the jokes move by so fast too. Like for every gag that doesn't work, it just moves on. Like it never lingers on a joke for too long. It doesn't like jerk off about how funny it is. It doesn't repeat any of the humor without like adding something to it. Cause like every time like a joke doesn't work, like I didn't find like every bit funny personally, but it's
Sure.
just like yeah, that was kind of cute because I know like five like absolute bangers of a joke are coming my way. It's like it's one of the few movies where not every joke lands, but not every joke needs to. If that makes any
Well, and
sense.
I mean, even looking at like the critics of this film, like, I mean, this has like on Letterboxd right now a 4.5,
Yep.
which I think might even be higher than Parasite, like
It's
like
one of the
the
highest
last, you know,
rated movies on there.
massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, Rotten Tomatoes. What is this anyway? Like, I mean, it's like, I mean, the just even looking at YouTube, it's like it's amazing to see like everyone from yourmoviesucks.org, Chris Stuckman. I mean, even some of the more like outrage critics, like Critical Drinker and stuff,
Mauler
are
really liked it. Yeah.
praising this film pretty much without any hesitation or nitpick. This is like one film that I you rarely see anymore where it's like everybody loves it.
Yeah, a
There's so
film
much
this weird
division, like,
being
and
so much.
it's
Yeah.
Film like
yeah.
this wouldn't exist without the Matrix. This is something that the directors themselves had said, and I think that this film uh, is what the last Matrix film wanted to be, but
Yes.
couldn't.
Yes, I
Like,
100% agree.
I enjoyed the last Matrix film for all the wrong
I did
reasons.
too.
I like that it was just like a big middle finger to Warner Brothers for making them make it in the first place. And it absolutely kind of failed. It is a tragic thing, but this film completely uh, succeeds in every way that that film just couldn't by fundamentally by what it
Well,
was.
and I mean, here's the thing, and I liked the last Matrix film too. I mean, it was an absolute disaster. I still enjoyed it. But I would argue that the Matrix is the Matrix 4 was coming from an almost very like cynical worldview.
Very, very cynical.
It felt
Yeah,
like it felt more like Gremlins 2, where it's like this is a person
Yeah.
who does not want to come back to this world and is almost
Being held at gunpoint. Yeah.
making a point like through satire, whereas this, I think, ultimately is more optimistic in what it's
yeah.
trying to accomplish. It's more wide-eyed. It's
It,
more full of hope, and I think in that way it's kind of unfair to compare them. But I do agree that this is way better of a film overall
oh yeah.
than the fourth Matrix. Yeah.
Yeah, one way it's better than the fourth Matrix film? The action in this movie is fantastic. Like, the fight
I
choreography
agree
is
a
so
hundred
Yeah.
good.
percent.
Like, there's so
Yeah.
much great coverage. Everybody does their own stunts. Jamie Lee Curtis did her own stunts. They actually, like, put her on a wire in that scene where she flies up down the staircase. And
Yeah.
apparently, so the two martial arts guys that shoved the dildos up their ass, they are YouTubers. They are not actors. They are YouTubers that have their own channel, and they help with the
Marshall
stunt
Club.
coordination. Yeah, Martial Club. And they are incredible fighters. And I can't stress enough, like, the coverage, like, the editing happens at just the right moments. Like, people gain up on each other, people get hurt. Like, and that's another thing, too. This is a powerful female protagonist that actually gets hurt. Like, any good action protagonist in the movie needs to take a few punches because that makes their return to form all the more satisfied. That makes it feel like the action is a struggle and we engage with the action a lot more. Like, I just
Well,
can't
that
watch crap
yeah.
like Captain Marvel or the Disney Star Wars movies anymore when we have the perfect female action protagonist in this movie. It's almost diehard quality, like just how much this normal person is being thrown into situations. She actually has to have like a stitch, like a scar looked after in one scene, and like she has to
Well, it does.
like be
It does
genuine
pay.
about saying like I love you while also fighting the person she's up against. Like it feels like there's so much of a struggle, but that makes it all the more engaging. And I
Well,
just
it
don't
makes
know
it
how
more
so
human.
many writers.
And
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they definitely pay homage to Kill Bill as well,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
another great female action film. And I thought it was interesting that Michelle Yeoh said that she had actually considered retiring from acting until Quentin Tarantino. She met with him, and he was like, "Oh my God, no, you can't!
No.
Like, I love
Yeah.
you." It's like,
Please
okay,
stay. Yeah.
no, I'm serious. Like,
Oh, I
you
believe
know,
it.
it
Love you.
was
Show
like
me your feet.
yeah, basically it was like this very long, like he started, you know, she talked about it in an interview where he was like just talking about all of these different scenes that she had done and different movies and what it meant to him, and that almost rekindled her love of acting, and you know, just knowing that she meant something to someone. um so yeah, I mean, I think this film, but I think this film shows that heart and passion and really love of cinema. I mean, this is a film that is constantly homaging, whether it's Kill Bill or it's Ratatouille.
But it doesn't let those references drag it down. And this is just
no, it
references for the
doesn't.
sake of references. It
It's
has its own message to say using those references to assist it, which is
oh,
I was
definitely.
talking to somebody on Facebook about this movie that basically said like, "Oh, this is just like a Marvel movie where it's just wink wink nudge nudge. Hey, remember that from In the Mood for Love, remember that from Kill Bill," and it has no substance of its own. I'm just like, if you never watched Kill Bill, if you have never watched In the Mood for Love, which my sister has seen neither of those movies, you're still gonna get a lot out of this film. Whereas the difference with something like Jurassic World Dominion, when it references like, um, you know, Dr. Hammond coming down on a helicopter for the first time, and then Laura Dern coming down off a helicopter for the first time, it doesn't make any difference except for the fact that Laura Dern's just an asshole for ruining like all of his fossils. Like it has no emotional value outside of the nostalgia. This is nostalgia bait, but it's like we're gonna, it's like Tarantino or other like film nerd filmmakers. So it's like we're gonna use this reference to do something. We're gonna build off of it, which is a key difference.
No, and I actually have not seen In the Mood for Love. I have seen Fallen Angels, which is Wong Kar-wai, and I did actually read that during the time that he was retired. um, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Oh God, forgive me. Short Round. Data.
K. Hugh Kwan.
Wrong.
Yes, yes. Yeah, he actually worked on a handful of Wong Kar-wai films, like assisting with the production of those. So I thought that was a neat, you know, homage that sort of bridges the gap, you know. And I will say, I mean,
Absolutely earns it because of that, I think.
yeah, well, and that's a thing too, where it's like, this isn't just a good movie. This isn't just heartwarming. Like, it, it's a film that, like, I don't know, man. It's like
It's hard to describe.
It feels like it was fun for them to be a part of, and I feel
100%.
like that
Yeah.
transcends and translates to the viewer.
Yeah, like I was watching the behind the scenes for this movie, and I can't stress enough how much it looked like a student film in a good way. Like everyone's just having so much fun. There's a lot of like fun trolling in the special features. There's a segment where they do a bunch of time lapses, and it's just the rocks over like a long period of time. I'm just like very funny, guys, and it
Yeah,
opened up
right.
with Daniel, like one of the Daniels, the white guy, just being like, "Hey, we're talking about rocks. All right, thank you. Those were the special features." And then it goes black for like 30 seconds, and then it shows the actual special features. Like every part of this movie just feels like they had so much fun, and all of the filmmaking aspects come together. The cinematography, the sound design, the soundtrack, the editing is so good. Like the costume design is very underappreciated. Like I feel like that's
Well, I
something
mean,
people don't really mention when talking about this
the
film.
the writing and the dry
Edna
humor. I
Mode.
mean, I love the
Yeah,
fact that
Mo,
I
sorry.
love the fact that the humor is like so dry. I mean, the idea that she's like the chosen person, but it's only because she made all of the wrong decisions.
Yeah, she's so basic. It's like the
Yeah,
Lego
no,
movie where it's
You're
like you were
living your
someone
worst
special.
you.
Yeah.
You
yeah,
do everything because you're so bad at everything.
yeah. No, I mean it's hilarious and it has a lot of heart, and yeah, it does lean into a silly absurdity that kind of grates on your nerves a little bit, but it's hard to stay mad at it. It's like it's just fun. It's fun. It's well made.
But
It's
it
a
also
beautiful
has like a
piece of
very
art.
clear, in-depth message. And I'm glad like
Yeah,
it isn't just like, oh, everything sucks, let's go for nihilism. But I'm glad it isn't just like, oh, the universe is hunky dory, just brace everything with a smile. The message is more along the lines of the universe sucks, but we gotta take that in stride. We gotta fight against it and do what we care about for our loved ones. It's a crazy world
yeah.
out there, but we
Yeah,
just do what we can, and that's the best anyone
his
could do. If you try too
he,
hard, you're just gonna fall apart.
Ke Kwan's whole speech about kindness
Yeah,
absolutely broke me.
the
Like
saw fight.
I teared up in the theater watching that, and him saying that in another life I would have loved just doing laundry and tattoo with you. Those two lines just uh absolutely broke me.
I
I think
cried
they're
again watching this movie. Yeah.
just because it's so sincere. Like it's so sincere, it comes from the heart. And this film absolutely embraces the idea of optimistic nihilism, where nothing matters, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. Like we can make meaning uh we can make meaning in spite of the universe not caring about it. um
It's
and yeah,
about family.
it's about family. It's about family at the end of the
And
day.
I
But
can't wait for the universe with Vin Diesel showing up as Ratatouille.
oh
Uh,
fuck, this is supposed to be a single one-off film that didn't fall into franchises, but the minute you get Vin Diesel involved, we're gonna get like 8 films.
Yeah, let's
yeah,
not.
Fuck.
Fuck, man. Like this movie. My
It,
issues. I don't know. It has a lot of exposition in like the opening 20 minutes. They switch languages a lot, which is a bizarre choice a lot of movies are doing now. Who cares? Who cares? Who gives a fuck? It's a great movie. I can't nitpick everything forever. I can only live for so long. Who cares?
it's one of those films that kind of just defies criticism. I mean, you can nitpick and criticize things, but ultimately this film works because it's committed to what its core message is, and
yeah,
it's
and
greater.
it
It's greater than the sum of
understands
its
what it
parts.
is.
And the
Exactly.
fact that they,
Yeah.
they, they worked on this for they worked on this script for like 10 years, going back and forth. And every time some multiverse idea came out, like when Rick and Morty came out, they're like, "Oh no, we got to go back to square one and rewrite this."
Yeah.
And I think that actually helped it become what it was, because they had the idea on the back burner for so long, and when with every new thing coming out, they kept coming back to the former, kept changing it and working on it. And by just being patient with that, it really let it kind of steam in the zeitgeist. And I think it just comes up on top of everything that we've been working to so far. Like this accomplishes more thematically, story wise, than everything the MCU has put out, in my opinion. Rick and Morty. Um, I think it trumps all of that, and I think this is going to be like the tent pole for this era of movies, and I'm curious to see where we will go from here.
So
Well, I think
Aaron
it's
alluded to something earlier where it's like this is the kind of film that will be defined as a classic, that will be viewed as The Matrix and Star Wars. I don't care if I'm overhyping this movie. That's absolutely 100% true. This is definitely going to be destined to be a classic. Thankfully, not a cult classic. Thank you guys for seeing this in theaters and not making it a box office bomb like most good movies lately.
Mhm.
I wanted to give them my money in theaters. I just didn't have a theater near me.
Yeah, thanks, America.
So
I wanted to go see it again, but making the trip out to go see it again
yeah,
was not viable at the time. But I pre-ordered it as soon as I saw that there was a 4K available, so now I own it. Um, I'm tempted to also buy the Walmart exclusive that's covered in googly eyes, just because
oh
of
yeah.
that. But then again,
uh,
I could just go to the dollar store and buy googly. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a sudden resurgence of interest in googly eyes because of this movie.
I
yeah,
wouldn't be surprised at all. Oh, man, like what did
definitely one of the best of the year.
I'd say the best of the year. Like it's gonna be hard to top this one.
I
This
mean,
will also
I
this will
think
also make for like the best low effort Halloween or cosplay costume idea. You literally just go as yourself. You put a single googly on your forehead, and I'm the Alphaverse ascended version of myself.
Yeah.
I will say, I mean, it's hard to say because I love the Northman, and I would almost put that on par, but like I think it's down to like personal preference, and I do really love this film. So it's been a great year for film so far. It's only
Yeah,
going to get
not too
tougher
shabby.
as the year progresses. We got Killers of the Flower Moon coming out, or whatever the name of that Scorsese film is. Darren Aronofsky's The Whale.
Jordan Peele's
But
Nope.
yeah, but I'm going to tell you, it's going to be hard to top this. This is a great film.
Yeah. What would you guys rate
I
it?
really hope that people just don't like forget about it, or the Academy specifically doesn't forget about it.
Yes.
Because again,
Eight.
I really don't care ultimately what the Academy chooses. It doesn't reflect what's good filmmaking anymore, in my opinion. But they deserve all of them.
Yeah. A24.
In my
Get
opinion.
this movie on the Oscar shortlist. Do not fuck this movie like you did with Waves. And I'm giving this
I have
film a
not
9.6 out of 10. James Hunt's saying, "What the fuck are you doing?" Breaks in 9.7. That's my rating.
Nice.
given it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah. We got
I'm
him.
gonna give it a 10.
Woo!
Hey.
Nice.
This is a perfect movie. I don't have any more words to describe it.
Damn.
Wow.
Wow. Were we this positive about a movie before? Like all of us this positive?
Yes.
Godfather, maybe?
Oh, Godfather. Well, Eyes Wide
Part
Shut,
two.
probably.
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Oh, yeah.
Eyes
Perfect
Wide
Sense.
Shut. Yeah. It's
This is a
very
rare
rare, but it does
moment.
happen.
Yeah. Eventually we agree on something, which yeah, it's a pretty rare occurrence. And thank you.
Well, and no,
yeah,
I mean
sorry.
that does tie into what I was saying too, though. It's like, you know, it's hard to even it's hard to even think of a film that when you go to like Adam of Your Movie Sucks, when you go to Chris Stuckman, when you go to like The Critical Drinker, like basically every film critic on the internet, whether that's like a legitimate film critic, a YouTuber, like even just all of us, like we're all like, holy shit, this is fantastic. This is a great film. It's very rare for something to bridge that division, just in general.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
went
and
out of my way to look for Letterboxd reviews that were like negative and were more than like 2 words, and I found this one, and it just felt like this very very long-winded diatribe that really talked around it, and it's just like I don't really buy it, da 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 da, and it's like they're really scraping the bottom of the barrel to critique the thing. Like it didn't, and then the same person posted like a 5-star review for Crimes of the Future, and they're just like, fuck, man. Which
well,
is, I mean, hey, I like Crimes of the Future too for very different reasons.
well, we'll
But
have to save that conversation.
you really have to stretch to even have a super negative take on this film. I think.
Yeah, there is not a person I personally know that doesn't like this movie. Like this is the first film my family agrees on, like since I don't even know, since Logan. Like we never agree on movies, but we all agree that this film is great. Like man, please
roster of
go.
films that all of us can agree and watch and rewatch, and Galaxy Quest is one, Mad Max Fury Road is one, Hot Fuzz is one, and I think this is one. This is one of the few family films that everybody in the family can get together and enjoy.
And watch some
Definitely.
good old dildo action. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us this episode. Why don't you tell us what's in tune for next week, or what's scheduled?
Boy. Well, it's I don't want to set the world on fire. We go from the multiverse to the end of the world. We're going to be talking about Children of Men. We're going to be talking about Mad Max Fury Road. And we're going to be talking about Turbo Kid. And I won't be here, but our good friend Aaron Kramers should be here. This was his episode suggestion.
Yeah, we're going to try and get him on board, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm excited to hear you guys talk about it. So have fun, boys. It's been a hell of an episode, as always.
Will do.
Until next time.
Is it first day yet?
And stay tuned for Conan O'Brien.
Have